Welcome to Season 2 of Malevolent Autopsy. I'm your host, Queen. I use she, her pronouns, and before we go any further than that, let me just warn you, this show contains major spoilers for everything in Malevolent as of the date this episode is published. We're going to dissect the patron votes that drive the story week to week, so grab your scalpel and let's begin the autopsy. And I'm here tonight with the wonderful and illustrious Vol Control. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell me what part of Arthur's body you control?
Howdy, hello, I'm Vol Control. I use he, him pronouns, and tonight I am controlling Arthur's pectoralis major and pectoralis minor, which are the hugging muscles.
The hugging muscles! I love that!
Yeah, I asked Google what the hugging muscles were.
Oh my god, that's adorable.
Surprisingly, that's the answer.
Oh, that's adorable. I love that. Yeah, hugs in our podcast. Do you want to give us this week's chapter summary?
Sure, I would love to. This week's chapter was chapter 257. And magpies that we are, we decided to snatch up the piece of Lilith that fell off, and naturally, Arthur absorbs it into his hand. As Antoine is rapidly approaching death, Arthur holds him and tells him in another life he was loved. After he goes softly into that goodnight, Arthur and John wonder what to do next, which is when our magpie tendencies come home to roost. Do we take John's suggestion to use the talisman to revive Antoine and interrogate him for the location of the Blackstone? Or do we leave him to his eternal rest?
Yeah, this was a incredibly sad episode.
This was a doozy. Yeah, this was a real episode for the books.
Yeah. I will just say, because public doesn't know, Booth John is back, thank God, like we've mentioned, but also he sounds so serious and so, like, ominous, but it's not even fun. It's just scary.
Yeah, at the beginning of this episode, BJ had a real, like, coming to Jesus talk with us about, like, this is it. This is, for all the marbles, this is it.
Yeah, and he was like, I'm sure you can feel it. We're coming up to, like, the end game. And I was like, oh, dude, don't remind me. He was also equally pretty fucking scary at the end of the chapter, too, giving us our options. But we'll get into that. We have a lot to talk about this episode.
Yeah, this has been predictably a very passionate week in Poll Chat. Very passionate.
Yeah, this is the most activity I've seen in a long time. So, I mean, just starting, to really briefly covering a couple of key moments in the chapter and things we wanted to touch on before we move to the vote chat. I think your stuff is chronologically more appropriate to start with.
Yeah, well, I think this always happens in Malevolent chapters where the second half of the chapter is so gut-wrenching or so interesting, or like, it introduces sort of like the new action, like, okay, this is what we're going to be thinking about this week, that sometimes we forget the crazy shit that happened at the beginning of the episode. Hello? Arthur just absorbed a piece of Lilith? Excuse me, what?
Yeah, out of all the things that people thought were going to happen with picking up that nail, absorbed it was not anywhere on anyone's radar.
No. And I thought it was also really interesting that John does describe it, and it is like somewhere between a hardware nail and a fingernail.
Yeah, it's hard to describe apparently, which I'm down for. I don't like the way that Arthur slurped that up and now is like,
oh no, don't say it like that.
Yum.
Never say it like that.
Absorb through his skin this nail, and now like she's part of. I don't like it. I don't like anything about it.
Paulette in the chat actually says, "Did you guys not expect him to absorb it? Oh my god, I must have been alone in that."
Oh my god, Apollo,
Apparently.
did you expect it to absorb it? You wild. Wild.
And I love how John's like, "That may have been a bad idea. Add it to the list."
Add it to the list is
Great
so
line.
good. That was really good. And I also really loved the, like, I don't know, John's stupid way of always pointing out the fucking obvious and Arthur being
Right.
like so over it. It's really
Yes.
good.
Yeah. The other shocker from earlier, the first half of the episode, is Everard's fucking dead. What? Since when? Why did my guy have to die?
I mean, the funny thing is, somebody pointed out in chat earlier too, in the Discord, the fact that, sorry, not somebody, Liz pointed it out in the Discord, which I thought about it, but I didn't say it because I was worried I was wrong, which is what you get when you're not brave enough to speak up. Well, Arthur's nightmare and how Everard was like, my castle. And I was like, oh, that's a symbolic
Right.
thing. And it sure
Yeah,
fucking wasn't. It was his actual castle.
Yeah, yeah.
On top of that, his castle being gone, like, Arthur didn't know that. That's not part of his brain. So,
Right.
like, it had to have been Lilith that gave him that information, which means Lilith had to know it. And there's speculation that Lilith got it from Antoine. So it's like telephone.
Right. Right. And what else does that mean that Lilith knows? I mean, I presume that
Yeah.
doesn't mean she knows the location of the Blackstone, because she wasn't acting like she had it.
Well, how about these fucking amazing questions in chat? Like, HD says, I was hoping the secret passage would have come back, which I just wanted to mention because, yeah, same. But Hydrus says, also, what destroyed the castle? Bird says, also, how did Lilith know that? How did she feed him that? Autumn says, if Lilith knows the castle has fallen, where has she fucked off to? Hydrus
Right.
says, Lilith, Mother Darkness, is there someone else after them? Bird says, if she knows, where did she go? Where is she? So there's a lot of like, if she, we all thought that she was going to go back to the castle for the stone, but obviously she knows there's no castle. So where the fuck did she go?
Right. Honestly, when they said that the castle was gone, not like destroyed or like defeated, but gone, all I could think of, and this is a deep pull from a childhood movie favorite of mine, in a movie called Freddy the Frog, they have this like evil technology that basically like removes a castle and like places it somewhere else.
Oh my
and I just
gosh.
imagine this as like lifting the entire castle and just carrying it.
Someone said Everard's moving castle in the chat. Misraa.
Very good.
I love that.
Very good, yeah. And then the episode just gets more and more heart-wrenching, heart-touching, and we get hugs. We finally get a hug in our horror podcast. I never thought I'd see the day.
Yeah, that was a very touching moment. I also liked how that was soundscaped because it was very clear to me that they were moving closer to each other. I like how Harlan has always peppered in the tiny little words that Arthur and John exchange. It's very human to say like, here, come here, there,
Yeah.
I've got you, kind of that kind of thing, to imply that they are in some way touching or interacting. And
Yeah.
John's always done that when trying to guide Arthur, which I've really appreciated. But in this moment, it was so nice to hear Arthur doing that for somebody else. And
Yeah.
it was just very beautifully conveyed, a touching scene without needing very many words.
Yeah. Which is what makes this vote so fucking hard.
Yeah, this is something. Yeah, and the fact that we chose to trust Antoine at the very top of all of this, and what that means and what that says about everything. There's so much that has been threaded together, and for him to be dead right now and for it to be up to us whether or not he comes back is huge, I think.
Yeah, I haven't quite formulated a complete thought about this, but something that struck me when I listened to the episode was it was interesting that we chose to trust Antoine again and again, and then in his dying moments we chose to lie to him. And I just think that's an interesting dichotomy, I guess.
I wanted to point out this comment from Nukuome, which is, I'm a lot more interested in who Lilith was waiting for because it sounded like she was waiting for Cain to show up to get the Blackstone from Arthur. I think that a lot of us were under the impression that she was waiting for Cain. That's very likely still what she was waiting for. I have to wonder, like, what she was thinking, because if she thought that he was just going to show up once she had the Blackstone, I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense, because, like, Cain can't see Arthur apparently right now, and told him to call him when he found the Blackstone. I don't know,
Yeah.
like, if he can't see the Blackstone, how would he know that Arthur touched it? In that case, why would Lilith think Cain's just going to show up because he grabbed the Blackstone? You know what I mean? So I'm wondering if it's true
Right.
and that she's actually waiting for somebody else, but I don't know who that would be at this point in time. It seems crazy to introduce another character.
Yeah, absolutely. Curiouser and curiouser.
I'm
So many questions, and we're only have what, two, three more, two more.
Yeah, two more votes. The fact that we voted to trust Antoine and then we lied to him in the end, even though that lie wasn't really our choice, I still feel like trusting him was the equivalent of saying that he deserves a fresh start. He deserves not to be judged by the
Right.
actions that he hasn't taken yet. And so I think that if we hadn't voted to trust him, things would have shaken out totally differently and he might not have gotten such a peaceful send off.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was Misraa said, if we hadn't voted to trust, imagine Arthur being cruel to Antoine in this moment and telling him he was an evil, manipulative cultist in his final moments. And also, like, all the times that he's been kind of cruel to Antoine as of late. You know, just imagine if we had chosen not to trust him and how mean Arthur would have been.
Honestly, like, it would have been a pretty ruthless moment in the podcast, I think. But I also think it would have fit really well, too. So I can see different ways it shook out and how wonderful it could have been either way. But I'm glad it went, well, I hope I'm glad it went this way, but that's for Vote Talk. I wanted to point out really briefly, the music killed me in this chapter. What
Yeah.
really hit
Yeah, the music was really good.
for me was absolutely the music. The music, especially when Arthur is talking to Antoine, and it's just those same notes over and over again. I was like on the verge of tears again because it's just such a an impactful moment already, and then to add the score underneath it, so good. And I wished Rose was
Yeah.
here, because I was like, oh, Rose would have things to say and tell me about.
Yeah.
We're definitely gonna have to do another big musical episode, maybe by itself. Maybe we'll do like a special episode with just music stuff. Arthur's lie, that's going to be something we're going to also touch on in Vote Talk more. But I just wanted to say that the line, a friend's love can carry you through the world's trials and tribulations, sounded like Arthur talking about him and John, which just absolutely killed me.
Yeah.
It also, the whole composition of this scene also made me think of actually Thoreau and what he might have wished for her. And it really hit me that, like, every time we get Arthur holding somebody who is dead or dying in his arms, it just makes me think of how hard that is for him, and how, like, he definitely is going to be remembering holding his baby in his arms when she was dead, and like how that would hit him so much harder than even it would hit somebody who's never experienced that. So it's just a lot. And then the fact that he repeats Antoine's name like 3 or 4 times as he's
Oh my
dying
God.
absolutely killed me.
Baby. Yeah. Oh man, it was so well done. It can be kind of cliche to have these sort of like dying scenes and then the person's like, head slumps. But this was just so beautifully acted and timed, and I thought it was really lovely.
And how about the fact that Arthur keeps repeating his name until John says, and Arthur fully knows he's gone already, but John has to
Yeah.
say his breathing stopped. Like, John
Yeah.
can't bear to hear Arthur go through this anymore, and Arthur is just not letting it go. And then, there was so many good things about the way that scene finished out. Really, really good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it was really beautiful.
So, that all being said, we have a poll on our hands that is maybe one of the most divisive polls since I joined a year ago. Definitely not the most, but more active than almost any other vote this season, I think.
It's up there,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would say this is on par with all of the Part 43 votes. But I will say that it is a lot more divisive than any other vote I've ever seen. Because
Yeah, there's been
it's,
a lot of passionate debate.
yes, yes, and it's a very touchy subject. So let's talk about the poll. So the wording of the poll for this week was use the talisman versus don't use the talisman. And right now, the poll stands at 339 votes, and the ratio is currently 60% in favor of don't use the talisman and 40% in favor of use the talisman. So that's kind of the golden ratio for what you need to start a flip campaign, first of all. I will say that for quite a while at the very start of this poll, the margins were much different. I think it was closer to 70% in favor of not using the talisman.
Yeah, the use the talisman camp has been slowly creeping up.
Yes. So the other thing that I want to lead up front with is that there are a lot of traditions in the poll chat that have been collected over the years. Things that some things fall out of practice and we don't really do them anymore. Other things come back now and again. Somebody will decide to start doing something again, and then it'll come up, and then it'll go away. So, like any good group of people, we have things that have been buried for quite a while, and so when they come up again, new folks are like, "What is this? And why are you doing it?" One of those traditions is when there were particularly tough votes back in the earlier days of Malevolent, a user named Danny would consult her mom just for fun, who does not listen to the podcast, and she would give her a quick summary of what was going on and the choice, and then Danny's mom would make a vote and explain why she thought that way, and then Danny would report back, and inevitably there was a long streak of her mom being right about these votes. Harlan was amused by it and said she always seemed to get it right, and they're on the same wavelength. He really thinks it's funny and fun, and she does happen to always be right. So that kind of spurred on the idea that when we were having a really hard time deciding, or if we thought that there was a particular vote that needed more elaboration and we should do a flip, people would ask Danny if she could talk to her mom. So now...
Invoke Danny's mom.
Yes. So now we call her the Oracle, Danny's mom. And people have been asking Danny to ask her mom about this vote, which is not something we've done in a very, very long time. So that's kind of a big moment in history where she's been consulted again. We haven't heard back yet. She may not have time, or that's not her priority, which is absolutely right. Fair. But it was at least asked. We called upon her. The other thing I want to mention is that it's Invictus Con weekend, and currently we are going to be coming up on 3 days of a virtual convention, and that is going to be probably taking up everybody's thoughts and time. So I don't know how much more deciding and thought will be had for the poll, but that does not mean a flip can't happen. And in fact, I would say there's a good chance it might, because we'll have more people actually looking at the Discord than usual, since only like less than a quarter of patrons check the poll chat. So a lot more people are off of the Discord and inaccessible to arguments unless you post in the Patreon comments.
Somebody mentioned something terrifying and said, what if we end up with a tie during Invictus Con weekend, which...
That won't happen.
Oh my god.
That won't happen. And you know why that won't happen? Because there's like 4 or 5 people who are dedicated to staying up and watching the damn poll. So, and me being one of them, one of my first few polls, I stayed up literally all night because it's 4 a.m. when the poll closes for me. And I literally stayed up and I had a list of people to ping if it looked like we needed to do a flip. So we won't flip. We won't tie, but it will suck if we get close and I have to stay up all night. So anyway. That all being said, before we go into all of the exciting stuff we have to talk about, Vol, how are you voting?
I am voting for not using the talisman. That was my gut reaction, and I have been watching poll chat. My eyes are so tired from watching poll chat for the past few days because it's been so active and there have been so many excellent points and arguments, but I I still feel my gut reaction was the right one, and every time I listen to it, I'm just reminded, like, let that man rest. I do not, I don't like the idea of bringing him back to life to interrogate him about the Blackstone, which he has refused repeatedly to tell us anything about. I think it's unnecessarily cruel, and I, I don't think it's the way to go.
I get you. That was my gut reaction too, is to not use it, but I have flipped. So interesting trajectories. I would like to actually start off this kind of discussion with something that is not related to the vote, but is related to Antoine. I'm going to play a voice note.
Hello, my name is Graham. My pronouns are he, him, and you don't want to know how many takes this took. Today I want to talk about Antoine. Not about the vote, but about Antoine as a character, and about how this version of him is both parallel and different to the version of him we saw in Call of Cthulhu Game 1. In Call of Cthulhu Game 1, Antoine is an old man. He has lived, I did the math, he has lived 9 human lifetimes over, and then some. He has been twisted by that time. He has become conniving and cruel and manipulative in all of these years spent in the pursuit of an inherently cruel goal. He is not the kind of person who would ask on his deathbed if he was kind and if he was loved. But there are echoes of that person that still remain in him. When he sees Anna again for the first time in 31 years, he cries. He tries to hide it, but he still cries. And there's a lot of context there that explains it that I don't really have time for, so you're just going to have to take me on my word. But the reason that Antoine becomes that way is because of his love and his loyalty and his devotion, specifically to Enti. Because love can be a purifying and a corrupting force. It is, I believe, neutral. It is not inherently good nor bad. And in Antoine's case, his love for someone who went down a dark path and became a not-so-great person is what leads him to follow Enti's footsteps. But also, we see here Antoine's love and his care for other people is what fuels him to do good things. And I have a lot more thoughts I don't have time to share, so I'm just going to have to leave it here. I will be posting an essay eventually. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, Graham. Appreciate your insight into who Antoine was.
Yeah, and I do think that it is really interesting, the sort of branching paths of, who the Antoine that Arthur knows about was, and where we see this Antoine here. And I do have to wonder whether his path would be affected by what we choose to do now. And that's something I've seen some people bring up, is that if we use the talisman to bring him back, yes, we give him a chance at living and a chance at life, but possibly at what cost? It's like, would he appreciate being brought back to life, potentially still ill, or would he think that it was unnatural, or he didn't want to come back this way and go down a dark path?
Yeah, I think you said it great. And I also think this next voice note that we have coming up will perfectly segue into some great discussions.
Hey, it alls. This is Ocelli, she, her. All right, so wow, what a vote we got here. One that I already see filling poll chats with wonderful arguments, and I'm all for it. Now, what piques my interest is the moral considerations for this vote. I'm currently studying philosophy, and specifically moral philosophy is my minor, and the specific choice has all sorts of bells in that area. I'd love to share 2 different layers, a way to approach this in that sort of moral ethics field, trying to stay as neutral as possible when laying out the evidence. With that being said, let's lay out some facts of the situation. Antoine has died in a relatively peaceful way, which is not something that's commonly happening to companions of Arthur. Antoine has died believing some half-truths that Arthur has told him for the purposes of peace and comfort. The talisman will not bring Antoine back wrong, as Antoine is still fresh enough, and we're not certain that his illness would be cured or lessened in the process of him being brought back. John has made it clear that he's doing this for the purposes of getting information about the Blackstone, and Arthur remains hesitant about this situation, and Lilith has previously mentioned that all things that are dead are not gone, and not all things that are gone are dead.
So we're going to pause at this point because I loved that small breakdown of all of the facts. And I think a lot of this discussion gets into some heavy emotional weeds that are absolutely warranted and deserve discussion, but I appreciated laying it all out there, especially the point that the talisman won't necessarily bring him back wrong because he's still quote unquote fresh enough. But I do want to add that, like, the talisman didn't cure Arthur's sickness, but we know that it might have in the long run, because Yorick said eventually that it would have helped.
Right, right. So, yeah, I mean, that does, muddy the waters as far as, people who say, like, oh, it'll bring him back, but it won't heal him. But then, yeah, Yorick had said that with the application or enough time that it would have cured his Horror sickness, or Arthur's Horror sickness. And so where does that leave us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's tough.
But I also loved that Ocelli brought back the not everything that is gone is dead and not everything dead is gone. This is how Charlie can still win.
This is
right?
how Charlie can still win. Okay. So I will say, using the talisman in this way, if I have to think about what would Charlie do, I don't know. This is one of the few where I could see him doing both, but I want to believe that he wouldn't, because he knows that why would you want to come back to this? He went out so nicely, just let him be.
Yeah.
But I also know that Charlie and Arthur share this very, I don't know, I can see them sharing kind of the same kind of drive where you put blinders on to anything but what's important. And this is one of my points that I'll talk more about later. But Arthur and John have been really trying to remember that what matters right now is the Blackstone, and like nothing matters more than that. So I could also see Charlie being like, I have a job to do. Sorry, buddy.
Gotta do it.
Yeah, come back to me.
Oh man, Ocelli in the chat just took me out. But would he do it for Roland?
Oh my God, stop it.
Oh, my heart.
Stop it.
Ouch.
Stop it. How dare you? So yeah, I think it's a difficult one, but I will say Lilith's quote still stands for me as to Charlie is fine. He's fine and he's coming back, and I bet you anything we'll see him in season 6. Anyway,
Yep,
let's keep listening.
All right, so with that put out there, let's approach the situation from 2 different types of considerations. Firstly, let's look at it from a deontology versus consequentialist perspective. So what the heck does that mean? Simply put, it means judging the morals of an action based on its intention or moral duties of the individual acting versus the consequences of the action itself. Looking at intention first, we know that John is wanting to do this for the simple reason of getting more information about the Blackstone. We're not sure that this would be Arthur's intention, though. It is very obvious that Arthur cares for Antoine, as if the care that he put into Antoine's peaceful death wasn't evident of that. So it's likely that Arthur's reason for reviving him would lie not only in this information, but also on the assumption that Antoine would rather be alive and that saving someone's life would be beneficial. And this distinction is important. Depending on who we focus on, the morals of the situation change. John's protected as something that we consider immoral. This is treating Antoine, as Immanuel Kant would say, as a mere means to our end, which completely disrespects Antoine as a human being. Now, Arthur's perspective would not fall into this category and would likely be deemed moral. So there's one nuance in the situation. The consequentialist perspective is just as convoluted. The one that'll operate off of, in this case, is hedonistic utilitarianism, which assumes that actions are moral in proportion to how much they tend to promote happiness or reduce pain.
Okay. There was a lot of information, but I also really like the specificity of this particular note from someone who is currently studying things that have to do with the pole. I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I completely agree. And this is really where, I've really put my foot down and dug my heels in about not using the talisman, is that I feel like the reasons for doing so are the wrong reasons. I'm not going to say whether it's moral or immoral. I'm just going to say I think it's for the wrong reasons, because if we were using the talisman to bring Antoine back and to heal him and to, give him a second chance at life, that would be a completely different question, and I would probably have a completely different feeling about it. But if the reason that we are reviving Antoine is to interrogate him about the Blackstone, like I said earlier, I think that's cruel, and I don't, there's no promise that Antoine will tell us And it feels so wrong to go from this, very tender, peaceful send-off to turn around and go, oh no, let's get him back up.
Yeah.
Let's ask him again to tell us about the Blackstone.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. But I also think that, like, even if it is a means to an end style, I think I have more grace for that because it feels like the end of the world. To me, it just feels like there is so much at stake. It's very much trolley problem too. It's like there's so much at stake that I feel like maybe you could see the perspective of Antoine, having to make this sacrifice, to have to come back after being asked to, after having what amounts to a rather peaceful death compared to the very violent ones in Malevolent previously.
Right, by Malevolent standards.
Yeah, having to come back to life after having a pretty good exit from the narrative. Maybe you could see that as like a sacrifice that has to be made to achieve this goal, which I remember we heard about how dedicated and how loyal Antoine is. And, even Graham was saying, like, he's very passionate about what he's committed to. And, maybe he would see this as a sacrifice that, of course, he's willing to make. On the flip side, I gotta wonder, I know Arthur was preoccupied and everything, but, like, I feel like if that really was the only person that they could have talked to about the Blackstone, like, I just wonder why it didn't come up when he was dying. Like, I know that would have ruined the moment, but, like, we just came out of a chapter recently where he was pushing and pushing in that flashback where he's pushing and pushing him for information, and he could not maybe give any. And I'm wondering if it would have even been beneficial to ask him at any point, because, like, when would he have given that information? And then if you bring him back and you ask him again, well, I wonder if his answer would even change.
Right, exactly. And I feel like it's not worth it. Although I do see the other side of things where it's like, how do we do the most amount of good for the least amount of pain? And I guess saving the fucking world versus inconveniencing a dead guy.
Well, that's the other thing. It goes even deeper, is that we don't even know that we're saving the world. All we know is that we have to do this or else Arthur has to see his baby girl get tortured forever. Like, we don't actually know what we're accomplishing right now.
And in the script of this episode, they talk about the Blackstone as protecting it. What does that mean? What's the plan, boys?
Yeah.
Like, what? I mean, yeah, like, bottom line, we want to know where the Blackstone is, but protecting it, like, what?
I have a feeling that they mean, like, protecting it from, like, Lilith or somebody else getting it so that they can give it to Cain. But I also don't know, like, just because somebody else has it doesn't, like, for example, if they had found the Blackstone and it was currently being kept in, like, a max security prison and, they knew exactly where it was, but they couldn't get to it, couldn't they just be like, oh, Cain, we found it, it's over here? I don't know, what prevents, what is the specifics of find me the Blackstone? Do they just need to know where it is, or do they need to physically have it?
Yeah, I've been wondering that myself.
Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah.
With this perspective, it's pretty clear that it would be best to leave Antoine alone. Reviving him will restore his life, but there's no guarantees that his illness will be cured when he's revived. So it's likely that he'll be woken up in more pain and potentially die again, if not from the illness, but from a number of other deaths that come with eldritch horror that is rampant in this podcast. Now, there is an argument to be made about the happiness that Arthur and John will receive about potentially getting more information about the whereabouts of the Blackstone. However, is this to be weighed as higher than Antoine's life and comfort? Additionally, more pain could be potentially caused if Antoine finds out that Arthur told half-truths about his other life. But this is not the only consequentialist perspective to take. There are ones considered with only maximizing the happiness and goals of the individual, which, in this case, would make it moral for Antoine to be woken up for the purposes of gaining more information regardless of his situation. So, even more nuances.
So, I really like the idea that what potential pain is going to be caused if Antoine finds out that Arthur lied to him, and what are you waking him, for lack of a better phrase, what are you reviving him to do? Like, what is the point of this besides getting information? And right now, for John and Arthur, I don't think there really is one. And so you have to consider what the fallout is. If they get what they want, then what? Because it very much reminds me of a similar problem that you will often find in shows and media. And I'm thinking of specifically an encounter that I created as a DM in a D&D game where, you know, there was an enslaved peoples, and they had their village taken over, and the players freed them, but they hadn't given any thought to what happens when you free people who've never had to be on their own and don't know how to support themselves. And they had the option to like help them restructure and rebuild, or give them freedom and kind of just leave. And they chose to just leave. And I was able to then bring them back at a later point and be like, so this is what happens when you don't have a plan. Like, this is what happens when you don't try and support people that you think you're doing a really good thing, but you didn't think it all the way through. Now, was it a bad thing that they helped these people gain freedom? No, of course not. It's a good thing. But there is a consequence that comes with that, which is if you aren't ready to support that group, what happens to them? And ultimately, like, you have to live with that, whether or not you regret it is your personal thing, but it's what happens after. And that's kind of how I feel about this reviving Antoine thing. Like, yeah, okay, you revive him and you get what the information that you need. And then what? Like, we're just fine because at least he's alive. But I don't know. It feels weird to leave him without anything, because I doubt that John and Arthur are going to be hanging out with him for much longer.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing is, like, yeah, he's alive, but he is, let's say he comes back in perfect health, sure. Like, and I highly, highly doubt that is going to be the case. But let's say he comes back in perfect health. Is he going to want to go with Arthur and John? Probably not. He's probably going to want to stop them. And regardless, even if he did somehow let Arthur and John just go on their merry way, he doesn't have any supplies. He is, yes, near the edge of the swamp, but still, like, and that's just best case scenario. But let's say that he comes back and he's still sick. What are we gonna do with him? Are we gonna try and carry this sick man around with us? Are we gonna just leave him to die again? I think that the people who are arguing that reviving him to give him his life back, I feel like that's a really short-sighted amount of time to think about him getting his life back. But I think that it's important to keep circling back around this vote and think about it as whether or not we get information rather than whether or not it's better to, I don't know, bring him back to life or not.
Yeah, we were having a lot of discussions in poll chat that ended up centering around things like morality and ethics, which this voice note is about, and I think it is a great discussion to have. Ultimately, it's hard to make that discussion productive because, first of all, it's a very individual thought. Second of all, it's fiction, and I don't feel this way about real life as I do fiction.
Exactly.
And like, people were bringing up things like do not resuscitate and medical malpractice and things like that, and very real world translations, which is common and normal because that's what your default is to like find real world comparisons to figure out how you feel about stuff. But it became very quickly apparent that you really can't use real life examples on this because it gets very tricky very quickly to make it a fictional game we're playing together as a group rather than these are my morals and ethics about real life and how I feel about real people.
Right.
And like, that's not the line we cross.
Yeah.
So I will just say that like, there is a lot of nuance to this vote, and the reason I wanted to record this and make sure this was part of the discussion is because it was talked about, it was considered, and I want people looking back on this to know that like there were a lot of discussions around things like the morality of what we're doing and the choice that we're going to make. And it was not easy. It's a very difficult vote. And there's been a lot of long running context for things. Like, for example, I would say, I felt very strongly at first that revive was not the right choice, just because I didn't like the idea of Arthur making the decision to revive someone, period, regardless of who it was, what it was for. I felt like the time he's taking separate to make this decision feels very intentional and deliberate, and it doesn't feel like a choice made, spur of the moment, impulse, or out of self-defense or anything like that. And that kind of makes me feel like, why does Arthur get to make that call? Because every other time he's had somebody else's life in his hands, it's been framed as a bad thing. It's been making the choice to kill Uncle, making the choice to he wanted to kill Larson. He chose to kill Uncle instead because Larson wasn't there. The murder of Mr. Faust. There all of these, even Lily's mercy killing and Vale's mercy killing. Vale asked for him to do that. And yes. Lily was a completely different circumstance, on top of the fact that it was a very emotional and significant thing in a strange place. This wasn't like something that we were told it was a quote unquote good thing, but it was an animal. It wasn't a person. It was two different things.
Right.
And it feels weird to me that we're okay with Arthur's decision to take life and framing it as a bad thing. But then when we flip it around and we say, oh, but Arthur should revive this person because they were a good person, or they could be a good person, and that's okay. And it felt very strange to me to have to battle with the idea of Arthur making that decision for himself. And I don't know, it felt weird. At the same time, like I keep saying, kind of the end of the world, and they feel like they're out of options. So what else would you do?
Yeah. Right.
We're gonna go one more time.
The second perspective to take is the battle of autonomy versus beneficence. This is a huge point of contention, especially in medical ethics, and the section will bring up a little bit of like real life examples dealing with death, and I want to warn you all about this in case you're sensitive to this topic. I myself have had to deal with this debate and decision with a close family member after a sudden death and partial resuscitation, so I'm sympathetic to this, and I understand if you want to walk away while I discuss this section. With that warning, I'm going to go about some definitions. Autonomy in this case refers to a person's ability to make their own decisions about their health or life. Beneficence refers to preventing any additional harm in regard to this person's health or life. So the debate is often over respecting a person's ability to decide on a course of action or overriding a person's decision and choosing the action that they deem would be best for them that minimizes that pain. In the case of somebody that's in like a coma-like state or someone who is dead, it's usually left to the family or close friends of the person to decide based on what they believe that the person who has recently died or the person that's in the coma state would want, or based off of something like a living will. This decision that we are presented with is much more like the former, and this is where this respecting autonomy perspective comes in. What would Antoine want in this situation? If Antoine knew that he could be revived and provide Arthur with more information on the Blackstone, or even help him find the Blackstone, what would he choose? Well, based off of past actions, Antoine is fiercely loyal and serving, sometimes to his detriment. In the face of waking up in pain or potentially later death, it seems likely that Antoine would choose for himself to be revived in order for him to be able to help Arthur more. So do we choose to revive him based off of that assumed decision?
Yeah, and that was what I was just saying, so I'm really glad that we chose that as a little pause point.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, you do have to wonder what would Antoine want.
And I don't know.
I don't know because I think that because Antoine knew that this was essentially a suicide mission and he knew that he wouldn't make it out in the end, doesn't that mean that he was prepared for death, and so to be at the end of his suffering would be preferable?
That's kind of how I was thinking, but I also think that if you took Antoine aside and you explained everything going on, if you magically had the time to lay out start to finish, like the Blackstone, what's going to happen if you don't get the Blackstone, like all this stuff, would he feel any differently? Then again, is that argument even relevant? Because we don't have time to do that. We're not promised the ability to make it, like, to explain to Antoine why we revived him. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then like, I guess you could say, you know, if we revive him and he's mad, we could just kill him again. I mean, if you want to be brutal about it, like, you can undo it, I guess. I mean, you can't
Terrible.
you can't usually undo death. So if you undo death, but then you want to redo it, you could do that. You could. I don't know.
Oh, I love Ocelli. Kelly is shouting in the chat like Chidi from The Good Place. No, that's not moral.
I mean,
Love that.
look. How many times do you get the opportunity to revive someone from the dead? But how many times you get the chance to kill people? All the time. Any time can be a time to kill people, technically.
So your argument for reviving him is that you don't get a chance to do it very often, so you should do it, even if you have to unrevive him.
I mean,
because he's mad.
It doesn't have to be painful. You could make it fast. It doesn't have to be. You could also say nice things to him when you kill him again. Technically, look, look. I'm not happy about voting to revive him. That's the transparent truth. I don't really want to revive him, but
I know.
I do think it's the right, like, quote unquote, the right choice, because of how I just can't get away from how focused they've been on the Blackstone. And, like, it really does make sense to me that they could be like, we have to be hard asses. This is going to suck for everybody, but we have to do the hard thing. Now, I think both...
It's like it's the end of the world or something.
So, I mean, both things are, like, you know, I can see how they would make sense to do, which is why it's a poll. And I'm just saying, you could technically undo revival. It's a point that I wanted to
Yes, I
bring
will
up.
concede to your point. You technically could.
Imagine, Misraa says, imagine Arthur again is asked how many people he's responsible for killing. Arthur, does killing someone I revived count, or does it, like, just cancel out? Oh God. Okay. Let's finish Ocelli's wonderful voice note before we butcher it worse. Before I butcher it worse. Oh, I miss Butcher.
On the other hand, beneficence focuses on not causing any further pain. Antoine died peacefully, as peaceful as you can get in the story, and this is a rare occasion. Reviving him will restore his life, but likely won't restore his health, at least not immediately. This means that Antoine will be woken up back in a state of illness and pain, with a chance of death in the same circumstances or something even worse. However, there is also a chance that what Lilith is referring to when Arthur was discussing Sir Vale's death with her is that Antoine could come back in even a worse state, or potentially even used against Arthur if he's just left as is. So does it actually cause less pain to leave Antoine as is, taking the risk that he comes back as something else? I say all of this to remind you guys that you're not crazy, and that this vote is a rough one. There's so many nuances to this choice with strong arguments on both sides. What's even more is that the choice reflects a lot of what we have already gone through in our personal lives or will inevitably go through, and it makes it even more difficult to reflect on with this in mind. I hope that this deep dive was at least interesting and provided food for thought for both sides of the argument, and I genuinely can't wait to see where this vote falls and where the episode proceeds. Take care, I love you guys, and you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, Ocelli. You were a great vehicle to talk about this vote. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that was really, really wonderful. I was really excited to have someone with sort of more in-depth knowledge of moral philosophy to weigh in on this one, considering it has been such a hotly contested balance of morality to some degree. Yeah, it was really cool to hear you break it down.
Yeah, and speaking of breaking things down, I did want to read out a text submission we got from Roses of Envy. She had a full day of tattooing and could not submit a voice note in time, but wanted to share these little messages, and Rose had some fantastic points, so I wanted to read them out. There are 3 points I consider with this vote. I am firmly on the side
Wait, can you do the accent? Can you do
Oh
the
my
accent?
God, no, I can't. do the
I'm just
accent.
teasing.
Oh my
Just
God.
teasing.
Oh, I wish. Rose, I need you. I need your beautiful voice. Okay. Rose says, there are 3 points I consider with this vote. I am firmly on side do not revive. 1. The heartfelt goodbye. Arthur gave such a wonderful send off to Antoine, letting him rest in peace naturally and narratively feels right. 2. The talisman. Why haven't we used it sooner? Why bring it up now? If we use it on Antoine, would he be in his right mind to use it? 3. The knowledge. Does Antoine even know where the Black Stone is? If he knows, would he be able to tell us in a timely manner? I really liked this. It's because it's really like a very bare bones of the do not revive side and where a lot of those strong points come from.
And actually, while we were listening to the chapter right before Autopsy, I had a sudden light bulb moment that sort of ties in with what Rose is saying about why bring up the talisman now. And I think a lot of people have said, well, since the talisman is being brought up now, it means that we are supposed to use it. Like, we have not gotten a whole lot of chances to actually use the talisman. But my counter argument is, if the talisman did not get brought up right now, it would be seen as a crazy omission. And we would be like, what? Like, we could have brought Antoine back. Like, why aren't they even thinking about the talisman? So I think that the talisman has to be mentioned here.
Yeah.
So that it, like, covers all of Harlan's bases, basically.
Yeah, I will say, I'm sure it gets annoying here. People be like, well, they didn't, we have this item and we're not using it. And, like, it's a good point to make. I'm not saying it's wrong for people pointing it out. But if I were Harlan, I'd be like, yes, I know. I've got plans. Like, just let me get to it. So I can totally see why, we've ignored the talisman before now. Because it was waiting for this moment, right? I think it's interesting because when you think about who else we could have used the talisman on, I don't know. I feel like, I guess my first instinct would have been Aaliyah, because Vale had something going on that was, I think, the talisman wouldn't have fixed that. I think it would have taken too long to fix that. And we also know
he
that,
might have gotten reinfected or something.
Right, yeah. People are saying John Wayne. They wanted to use the talisman on John Wayne, which was hilarious.
Hydrus in the chat says, I'm going to say something controversial. I feel like Harlan might be trying to write the talisman out. We've had so many votes centered around it lately. He wants that thing gone. And I completely agree. I'm pretty sure that the DM wants that shit gone. He does not like us holding on to hoarding that much power that we could technically use. I mean, it's still ultimately up to him whether or not we even get the opportunity to use it, but its presence in the story,
it's a huge game changer. Yeah, I don't blame.
Yeah.
If I were a DM, that talisman would have been broken by now, because I don't want that hanging around for everybody to cling to. I also know that when we chose not to drink the selenine, he says in the commentaries that he had Arthur throw it and break it so that we could not get it back or have it come back in any way, because he was like, oh shit, I need to get rid of this, which is totally what's going to happen with the talisman. If we don't use it right now, I think it's going to break, or something's going to happen to it where we won't be able to use it anymore. That being said, I don't necessarily think that's a good reason to use it. I just think it's a reason. I think it's there because I have been bitching about this excessively. It's totally coming off like sunk cost fallacy. We voted for it. We fought for it. We argued for it. We have to use it now. No, we don't. But
no, we don't.
I know what you're saying, but we don't. I stand by your votes whether or not it gets used.
Yeah, I've heard some people who are going the route of not using the talisman who have said, yeah, I don't care if we never use it in the story. I don't care. And I kind of feel that way. Like, it was a nice sort of like safety net, I guess, but if this is the sort of make or break point and we lose it or it breaks or whatever at this moment and we don't get to use it anymore, I still think I would stand by my votes to go fetch the talisman in the first place, because it felt like an action to protect ourselves and to not ignore any chance of an advantage against our many foes.
And on top of that, like, I was a voter who second guessed my gut and I decided to go for the talisman, which at the time was very deliberately told to us that that was trying to gain power and knowledge that we did not need. It was a greedy decision in the time. Now, I'm not saying it was the wrong decision. I'm saying that's what it represented. Okay. So it represented a thirst for knowledge and power that we did not need at the time. Then we refused to give it back, which got Arthur killed. Then because we stole it, right? So
Right. Yeah.
then John refused to give it back, which I think had to happen for character arc reasons. Then we chose not to give it back to her when she asked for it to give, to have it given back. I think this talisman is and has always been representative of like a negative thing. I don't think this is a thing we were rewarded with. This has always been a temptation not meant to be used. And I don't think just because we fought to keep it, for me, that doesn't justify being forced to use it to make those decisions worth something.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, at the end of the day, the majority of the voters are magpies, and you tell us that there's a shiny MacGuffin, and we're probably going to try and get said shiny MacGuffin and add it to the inventory.
I want to play another voice note from a friend of the show.
Hello, Autumn here, she, her. Chapter 257 has me in a chokehold, so I've collated a bunch of my arguments from Slowpoll into a fun mini-essay, so strap in, I'm blasting through this time limit. My knee-jerk reaction is to absolutely not use a talisman. Let Antoine sleep, he deserves it. We shouldn't be toying with his existence like some sort of god and making him have to accept death again when it comes for him. Because it will. Death will come for everyone, and it will not be so kind the second time round. At least now he isn't dying alone. But the demons in me are curious. What would happen if we revived him? Would he hate us? As devastating as it would also be fucking fascinating. Could he help us? Would he refuse to? Would he be brought back wrong? Now that he's aware of something after death, could this be the catalyst that sent him down a similar path to OG Antoine? Could he dabble in dark magic to bring Enty back now that there's a sliver of a chance he could be revived? So many questions that could actually be answered. Not to mention, when else are we going to use the talisman? This is our first opportunity we've been given to, and I want to give it a test drive, especially after all the trouble we spent to go find it and keep it in the first place. I think for me, this vote is about detaching myself from the story, because entirely in the moment, I wouldn't revive Anton. But with the benefit of our status as observers, and the fact that this story is created to entertain, I would want to vote to revive him for our entertainment, because that's what it would likely end up being. Even if we revived him out of the goodness of our hearts, that wasn't John's intention, and John was the one who suggested this course of action in the first place. Do we choose to view the story from a participant's perspective, or do we choose to view the story as many of the gods of this world do? Do we choose to relish in Arthur's journey, suffering and all, or do we try to fight with him? I absolutely feel like this choice will impact our future votes. Not even just Arthur's actions, but the way we interact with the plot from here on out. We need to choose. Are we trying to help Arthur, or are we no better than the gods who toy with him? We're treating these people like characters, which, yes, technically speaking they are, but also it's the way the gods treat humans in this universe, which Arthur is steadfastly opposed to. I don't think we want to align ourselves with the gods, lest Arthur end up opposing us. It just begins to err on the side of speculation. Near the beginning of the podcast, we weren't nearly as attached to Arthur and John, and if I remember correctly, BJ called us out on it. He asked us if we were here to just watch it all play out, to sow chaos when we felt like it, which sure, we may have been at the start, but now? Our journey mirrors John's in a way. Strong found his humanity, we've grown more attached to these characters, to this world. Do we choose to follow John's example and continue to fight for our humanity, or do we choose to return to indifference? You know what John chose. He would have rather died than returned to the king, but what about us? As BJ mentioned, this is the end game, and our choices matter. Though it may look like I'm hardline on keeping Anton dead, I'm still somewhat on the fence. I just find the points of this side to be much more interesting to argue. I hope you enjoyed my essay. Have a fun rest of your autopsy.
Thank you, Autumn. Really appreciate you, and always such a delight to hear your lovely voice.
Yeah, that was a great message, and I do love that it's the demons inside
With
of
the
you
demons.
that are tempting you. Very good.
I particularly loved Autumn's playing God argument, which I talked about earlier, and like death comes for us all. Yeah, I'm very much. It's hard for me to divorce myself from the idea that no matter what, Antoine is going to die again if we revive him, and putting him through any death kind of sounds like it's a shitty idea. Like, yeah, you can have a second chance at life, but you are gonna die again. And I don't know if that's good or not, because of how nice it was the way he went out. Again, asterisk, comparatively to all of the other deaths in Malevolent.
Yeah. I just thought of one of my favorite quotes, death is certain, its time is uncertain. And I was just thinking about how, ultimately, Antoine is going to die again if we revive him, but it might be in 5 minutes, or it might be in 50 years, or 500 years, or however long he lived in Arthur's timeline. Yeah.
I also, another point that I wanted to bring up was that this is, it's another teachable moment with John, which I know Misraa is really, really fond of. The perspective of decisions being like teaching moments for John, and this teaching him that, well, if somebody dies and you don't want them dead, you can just undo it. No biggie. Like, that's not something that you need to worry about or consider or think about for a hot second, because it's always just the correct answer is to revive people because you can and you should, and it's always a good decision. Like, I don't feel like that. It feels like when the loss of, okay, this is kind of goes back to why I don't want Faro to come back. When the loss of a character is so significant to the building of another character like Arthur, it really screws shit up for me, just in my personal preference, when that character's loss is basically invalidated because Faro comes back. Now, the whole journey was kind of like, cool, yeah, you matured and you figured out how to get past grief and guilt and all this stuff, and in reward, here's your daughter. Like, that's not a satisfying ending, I think, to most people. And for me, feels very much equivalent. Like, Antoine's first go-around wasn't good enough for you. So we're going to bring him back because we can. And very much that quote of, when they were talking about, like, wasn't Antoine the one who said, was my life meaningless? And the idea that, like, he dies, it's great, and then we bring him back, and it's like, well, actually, hold on. You could have done one more thing for me.
Right. So, Queen, are you still voting to use the talisman?
I am.
This entire episode, you have been, like, lauding the praises of the arguments to not use it.
Yeah, I'm still voting to use it, because I just feel like all of my arguments fall apart in the face of nothing matters but the Blackstone. Hearing John and Arthur say those exact words in part 51... it's very hard for me to shake the idea.
That radicalized you.
Yeah,
I remember
it really
when that
did.
happened. You came into poll chat and you were like, oh no.
Yeah, because I don't know. I felt like it was very much the way that they are so focused on their end goal, and they keep trying to bring things back around to talking about the Blackstone. It just makes me feel like this story is supposed to go in that direction and supposed to make it like nothing else matters, and you have to do awful things sometimes to accomplish your goals. Because I don't know, I feel like as many negatives as I feel there are to reviving Antoine, I also know that, like, the alternative is probably, let's say they don't use it, and then what's the chapter like? Like, what's that chapter? Because I know what happens if they revive him. I can tell you what that chapter's like. But what the hell are they going to do? Are they going to stand there and talk for 10 minutes? Is Lilith going to come back? Like, I literally can't predict it.
I don't know. I want to find out. And I think I like that lack of being able to predict what will happen. Because, if you use the talisman, obviously we know what's going to happen. Or more or less. But if we don't use the talisman, I think that creates space in the story for something interesting, be it a conversation that Arthur has with John about how, like, you can't just bring people back or whatever. I don't know.
But I can't help but wonder, if I were knowing what I know, very limited, very, very, very limited, what I know about Harlan, he would think bringing somebody back to life was super fucking metal. Like, I keep thinking about Harlan and how much he loves things like zombie flicks, and how, like, all of that stuff, that very, like, action heavy oriented stuff, is very cool to him, and that he really likes playing with it, and the soundscaping he could do around the revival sequence, and, like, all this stuff. If he doesn't take that route, I mean, I'm of course interested and excited to see what happens, but I also feel like maybe he would be disappointed not being able to do a revival in the series outside of Arthur's.
Right.
And so I
Right.
feel like
Right.
not giving him that opportunity to do it is almost like he would be disappointed. And I, you know what, like, part of me
Interesting.
would be disappointed too, because I think that would be really cool to hear what he's gonna do, like,
Yeah.
audio wise. But I know that's also not like anybody's top. Well, it's not my top priority. Is like what cool sounds we can hear.
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about what you think Harlan would want to do, because I think our next voice submission, Bird kind of touches on some things that Harlan said when the chapter dropped. But before we get to that, I have to say, Misraa has called out what will happen if we don't use a talisman. John manifests and flies them to the castle. So, if you're voting against, if you're voting against not using the talisman, that's what you're missing out on. I just want you to know that.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, let's listen to our final voice note.
Hey guys, it's Bird, they them pronouns. I'm sending in this clip to touch on a couple of things that were really impactful to me from this most recent patron chapter, part 257. When Antoine lays dying and Arthur is telling him what kind of man he became in Arthur's timeline, Antoine asks, "Was I kind?" And that really sort of broke me, because it's a question that's so close to my heart. I believe, and have believed for a long time, that I am here on Earth to love and to bring kindness in whatever form that may take to as many people as I possibly can. Harlan said in the live React chat that on his deathbed he would want to know that he was kind and that he was loved, and I cannot agree with that sentiment more. And so to hear that asked in the episode in such a incredibly beautifully and broken way really hit home for me. Harlan also shared a poem in the chat, Success by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which then reminded me of a similar poem titled If I Can Stop One Heart from Breaking by Emily Dickinson, and I'd love to share both of those poems with y'all. The first is Success, and it goes like this. What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social connection. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. That is to have succeeded. And then, If I Can Stop One Heart from Breaking by Emily Dickinson goes like this. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope that this episode was as impactful and inspirational in continuing to bring kindness into the world to others as it was for me.
That was gorgeous. Thank you so much, Bird.
That was so beautiful, Bird, and I really felt a kinship listening to this, because that is also something that is so important to me, is to bring as much kindness into the world as possible. And you know, I feel like only one man, you know, I feel so small, but I know that every little bit counts and it ripples outwards, and it's so important to put that little bit of kindness out into the world. And yeah, I definitely resonate with, you know, I would want to know that in the end I was kind.
Yeah, I think that's a very common wish, and I also would like to know that I was kind and I was loved and I had love. And it would be a shame if I had to take that message back because we chose to revive him. But
Yeah.
but I will say that it's hard to it's hard because I don't feel like it was wrong for Arthur to lie, because I'm fully like that. I would do that in a heartbeat. If somebody was suffering and they were about to die, I would tell them whatever. It does not matter.
Sure. Yeah.
If you bring them back, you do have to face the consequences of that. And you have no promise that you'll be able to tell them that again. And, it's a whole thing. So, I don't know. I can tell I'm going against what I want. I mean, obviously, I'm going against what I technically want to vote for. I wrote up, I wrote an insane amount of words in response to somebody's slow poll post, Slate's post. And I decided to post it.
Yeah.
Because there's just first of all, I don't need to be arguing for somebody who's voting on my side. But second of all,
right.
I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of layers to the vote. And I hope that everybody in the public knows, if we didn't make the decision that you think we should have made, we tried really hard, guys. Everybody tried really hard. Both sides. It was very complicated.
Both sides. No matter what comes out in the wash, both sides tried really, really hard to win people over.
Yeah, it was a battle, and it will continue to be fought. We still have several days left before the poll technically closes. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope everybody had a good autopsy, and that you please make sure to clean your aprons and gloves on your way out. There's a big sink over to the, gonna pick a side, right, and you can dump them in there and just kind of swirl them around, and then we'll be good.
And I just wanted to give a huge shout out to everybody who sent in voice submissions. We didn't have to write an outline for poll chat because y'all covered all of the high points, and you did it wonderfully, and it was really fun to do it in this more interactive way. So thank you again.
The other thing I want to mention, we still need end caps. If you have not sent in a little fuzzy happy message, you can do so at our link tree. It'll say end of episode submission or something like that. The questions are already on the Google form, so you don't even have to think about it. I've listed a bunch of questions. You pick one and answer it. It doesn't have to sound good, and you can submit multiple. In fact, I would love it if you did, because I'd like to put one at the end of every single episode of Autopsy, but when I decided to do that, I didn't realize that I'm going to need some forever. So I kind of shot myself in the foot. So, I don't even know if we have enough listeners to ever be able to do that. So I don't really have social media. I don't push the podcast at all. So it would be awesome if you, even if somebody doesn't listen to Autopsy, go send in a message or whatever and just have them send in one. It doesn't matter. And as always, please use the public channel if you are ever listening to public episodes and want to live blog or anything like that, because we continue to release every single week, even if I forget to announce it. Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate all of you. Nothing but love and affection for all of you. Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. You can find everything official at linktree/Harlan Guthrie. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. And speaking of here, if you want to be part of the live vote chat I record each week, join the Invictus Patreon and connect your Discord account. We have our own private patrons-only autopsy channel. If you want to chat with me and maybe even some other folks you hear from on the show, you can also find a public autopsy channel from the Invictus Discord, so you can hang out even if you're not a patron. While Malevolent Autopsy is my pride and joy, it wouldn't be ever improving without some key players. Thank you to Misraa, Nikki, and Vol Control for their work editing and assisting with production. They do so much for the show, and they do it all as volunteers, and I couldn't be more grateful. To submit a voice recording, have your message read aloud on the show, or find us on other platforms, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. Let's hear from one more Malevolent fan before we finish this week.
Hi, this is Misraa, and one thing Malevolent has taught me is to be more comfortable as Arrow Ace. Growing up, I never had attraction to anyone, but valued my friends greatly. Like Arthur, the thought of settling with a romantic partner and following traditional marriage and family route didn't really feel right for me. It just felt wrong. It always annoyed me in books and movies where inevitably the two leads fell in love, usually after only knowing each other for like a few days, and the relationship was shown to be so much more important than any friendship. Characters would reveal personal secrets or risk their lives for their romantic partners and not for the friends they may have known for much longer. I love that in Malevolent, Arthur and John are shown to love and care for each other deeply, but not in a romantic sense, and Harlan has made it clear that their relationship will stay platonic. But their friendship is no less important or valuable than a romantic one, and I'm happy that we do get that example and representation in this show. And through this show, I have met many others who are also Arrow or Ace as well. It's nice to meet those with similar feelings on this and know that I'm not so alone in not following traditional standards of love and attraction.
I'm your host, Queen, and I'll see you next week. The horrors persist, but so do we.